So you got your notes open?
Yes.
Here we go. So your note-taking guide is in there. It looks just like this. That's what your note-taking guide looks like, the front page. So we got it. So we're off. Now, I've said many times, if you can't communicate, don't try to lead. Well, I believe that's so important. I've thought it's important for a long time. But let's look at the two words, communication and leadership. Now, by communication, what do we mean? It's the effective sharing of meaning. I came up with this definition actually in the first book I wrote, which was in the early 70s. I looked at all these long definitions about senders and receivers and all of this, that, and I said, but real communication is if we share meaning. So if you and I are talking, and my words mean the same thing to you as to me, and my facial expression means the same thing, and the same way if I'm talking to an audience, then we are understanding and communication. So communication is the effective sharing of meaning. And leadership, hey, leadership is simply leading to serve others and the organization. Or as I say in the book, community, because as I told you, I believe last time, community can be as small as a family. It can be a Bible study you're in. It can be an organization you belong to. It could be Troy University. The state of Alabama is a community. That's why we elect people to serve the state of Alabama. The U.S., the United States, is a community. We live in a global community, so community is another word for organization that really suggests we're trying to pull together as a team. So, communication is the effective sharing of meaning, and leadership, leading to serve others and the organization or the community. Now, let's look at two important things that impact communication and leadership. First is the way we look at communication, and the second one is some hindrances, things that hinder communication. Now, these first three slides, I put them in your book so you'd have them. Again, years ago in that first book, trying to define what communication was and looking at different models, some people pretty much say it's a communicator sending a message to a receiver. Well, how many have ever had a part in a play where you learned some lines? Well, what'd you do? You said your line when the other person finished his or her line. And that person would say, so pretty much you weren't listening that carefully to what the person said because you'd practiced this. You were just ready to say it your way. So you did your part. Many people communicate that way. Well, I told them, that's it. Well, it's more than just a communicator sending a message. That is very message-centered. This communication is a self-action, much like an actor. And you say, well, it's at least an interaction. And today, as I'm talking to you, I am sending messages to you, but I look at your feedback, and so far as I can read it accurately, I can tell whether it's registering with you, whether you're understanding or not. If I tell a joke and nobody laughs, I'll think, well, that didn't get through, did it? So, you see, communication, but that's still message-centered. Message being sent and message being received. Actually, communication is not just a self-action, interaction, it's a transaction. Now think of all the things that influence that. What's anything that influences it right now as I'm talking to you? Maybe the fact you haven't eaten lunch yet and it's lunchtime and that's beginning to bother you. Maybe the fact that you didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe the fact the temperature in here isn't quite right for you. Maybe just something else you have to do later. I need to know some things that I can kind of guess about you. I can guess your ages pretty closely. And I can tell you that I make some adjustments based on things such as age. I might say essentially the same things to a group of people in their 80s. This last Sunday I preached at Wesley Gardens where the people are in their 80s and even into their 90s. But I would use examples there that maybe some of these examples were things that happened 50 years ago, but they could relate to those people. And you'd say, who is that he's talking about? On the other hand, I might use some more current things with you that would go over their heads. So you see, you have to take account what are the different factors that affect communication. And so you're looking at the total transaction, not just the messages being sent and the messages being received. Well, I wrote a paragraph there that you can look at later, just saying you need to take things into account. It's not just a simple saying something and you're done and you've sent the message. Now, we looked at 3 ways to look at communication. Let's look at some things that hinder communication. Well, first of all, same words can mean different things. Clear back in 1977, just 2.5 years after Ann and I had moved to Montgomery, she called me. She said, "Hey, it's only 3 days till Christmas. We thought Uncle Lawrence and Aunt Layla weren't coming for a couple of days. They're going to be down here tonight. Could you get away from work a little bit early? Maybe we could buy their present and we could have it under the tree when they show up." I said, "Sure, honey. I'll tell you what. I'll meet you at the main door of Gaffer's department store in the mall at 4 o'clock. Now, Gaffer's was the store that preceded Dillard's. You're used to Dillard's stores today. Gaffer's were big in the South years ago. So, at that time, Montgomery had 2 major shopping malls. Those of you that know Montgomery, there was no East Chase Mall. Eastdale Mall, which some of you from Montgomery know where it is. You may know where the old Montgomery Mall was. The site is there, but it's not the kind of mall it used to be. They were 2 very good malls. Each had a Gaffer's department store. I jumped in my car, drove out to Montgomery Mall, which was closest to where we lived, and Ann wasn't there. That didn't bother me. Ann often didn't get places on time. With all of her good qualities, she sometimes ran a little late. Now, on the other hand, when I wasn't at Eastdale Mall where she was, she figured out the problem right away, because with all of my faults, I am usually quite punctual. Before the days of phones, you know. So she jumped in her car, drove the 4 miles or so from Eastdale Mall to Montgomery Mall. The problem didn't end there, because I had said, "I will meet you at the main door of Gaffer's department store in the mall." And to Ann, very logically, main door meant the door inside of the mall going into the store, and I was thinking about the outside door that was on the Troy Highway side. Well, we finally got together. It was a long and a frustrating wait. About 2 weeks later, I was speaking in Wetumpka. I think it was at the First Baptist Church, but I was speaking in Wetumpka. I told that story to illustrate problems in communication. About a week later, I was standing down in Montgomery Mall at the only J.C. Penney store in town, and I was waiting there at the bottom of the escalator, and the guy came up and said, "Hey, I heard you speaking up in Wetumpka the other night." He said, "I bet you're waiting for your wife, aren't you?" I said, "What?" He said, "You know, you told that story how you got to one mall and she got the other mall, and you got to one door and she got the other door." He said, "Where'd you tell her you're going to meet her this time?" I said, "No, wait a minute. I could just be standing here resting. I could be killing time." He said, "You look to me like a man that's waiting for his wife." I said, "Okay." But I told her I'd meet her right here in the only penny store in town, right here on the first floor at the bottom of the escalator. Here I am. He said, "John, step over here a minute. Look, you're standing at the bottom of the one that goes up. She's right over there at the bottom of the one that comes down." Well, don't you have stuff like that happen to you sometimes? The same words mean different things to different people. Now, a closely related problem, but a different one, is different words meaning the same thing. When we moved down here, I went in someplace and said, "I'll have some pop." And they looked at me and said, "What?" I said, "Pop." "You want me to hit you?" "No," I said, "Pop. It's in a bottle. You shake it. It fizzes. It goes all over." He said, "You want a soda?" I said, "No, a soda's got ice cream and stuff in it. I want pop." Well, I found out, by the way, are some of you places down here where they still call every kind of soft drink a Coke? Yep, there's some of you. That's true, isn't it? That is strange to somebody's near. You go in and say, "I'll have a Coke." "What kind do you want?" A Coke." Well, they said, "You want strawberry or what do you want?" I say, "No, it's either diet or regular. I know. See, it depends where you are, see? What I'm saying is, and you'll find this as you travel different parts of the country, even in the United States, you'll find things, and the world, of course, same words mean different things and different words mean the same thing, but a third problem is nonverbal. Nonverbal. The not words that we use, but such things as the actions, my gestures. What I do when I make a gesture may mean something and it means something else other people. And so you got to look, your gestures communicate. So as I'm talking to you, it may be different if I'm using gestures than if I'm not using the gestures communicate. Movement. You know, if I move around here like this, after a while this may communicate that I'm kind of nervous up here. I would hope my movement isn't that kind. I hope you can see I'm going to different parts of the room as I talk, but movement does communicate. And eye contact. Let me tell you how important eye contact is. When you're speaking to a group of people, you need to make eye contact with different parts of the audience. I would hope you'd think that I've been looking at your part of the audience some of the time, all the time. I don't think I've ignored any part of the audience. I've kind of picked out different parts of the audience. It just comes natural to me. But eye contact is important. You know, sometimes you're talking to people and they don't look at you. Like you can tell I'm not looking at you. I'm kind of looking over your head and everything else. Or sometimes people stare too much, you know. And this is different from different parts of the world too, by the way. But I'm just saying all of these things are part of communication. So certainly the words we use, the gestures we use are so important, and the voice. How you say things is important. I can come up and say this. You're an idiot. But this is different. Watch this. You're an idiot. My voice was different. My smile even came the second one. The first one you're thinking, what did I do? The next you're thinking, he thinks I'm okay. See, the voice does communicate. So the sternness in your voice or the friendliness in your voice, and I'm not saying sometimes you shouldn't be stern, but I'm saying your voice does communicate. And your artifacts. I wanted to say objects, but couldn't find a word that went with it. See, artifacts articulate, they say something. I didn't want to say objects, obfuscate. Okay, thank you for laughing. Okay, artifacts articulate. If you come into my office, is there anybody here that's been in my office yet? If you come, yeah, the guy at the camera has. You come in my office and you look around, you can tell a lot about John Kline. You see a picture of my wife and I 30 years ago. You see a picture of my wife and I and 5 kids 40 years ago. You begin to see something. You'll look around, you'll see, I think this guy was somehow affiliated with the Air Force at one time. You'll see various things around that will say a lot about who I am. So the things that we surround ourselves with, the clothes we wear, artifacts are things that are made, man-made things do communicate. The things we surround ourselves with, certainly the shirts we wear, as I read the different things and different shirts out here. Artifacts articulate, space speaks. You know, in some countries, they get this close to talk. I keep using you, you're sitting right here in the front. That's kind of uncomfortable a little bit. But then in some places they almost infringe on your space. In some places, don't get too close to me. So space does kind of speak. By the way, I've traveled in many parts of the world. It's interesting to see how different things, different gestures, different movements, different things communicate to different people. It really is. And there's things I can do some places that I can't do others. For example, if I offered you a candy bar, you wouldn't take it in some countries if I offered to you with my left hand. Did you know that? Same candy bar in my right hand you'd take. You know why? In some places this is considered the filth hand, the hand you cleanse things with, but this is the eating hand. And even if it's in that wrapper, you would be offended if I hand it to you with my left hand. So I'm just trying to tell you, there's different places like that. And other places, I might come up and I might go, how you doing? But not in Egypt. That's like you're putting him down like he's a dog or something. So I'm just saying, it just depends where you are. But that's even true, there are different things in this United States, different places, and then time talks. We'll talk a lot if I go over time. I'll let you out on time, I promise. But I'm just trying to say, let's say you had a meeting with me, and every time you had a meeting, you were late. Now, this is different than if you're coming from a class, and we understand that. But let's just say you've got meetings with me, and you're always showing up late. Pretty quick, that's going to communicate something, isn't it? So I'm saying the way we judge time, the way we use other people's time, these are just things that hinder communication. And here's a big one. If you don't have credibility, when you are leading, if you aren't considered an expert, in other words, you don't know what you're talking about, and aren't considered somebody that can be trusted, you're going to have pretty poor leadership skills. So credibility, establishing your credibility as somebody that knows what's going on and somebody that can be believed or trusted are important. Well, that's really a 3-hour lecture I just gave you and crammed it in just a few minutes here. Just wanted to tell you some things to think about. What we're saying is we do need to take care of the things that can hinder communication. Now let's consider an essay that you were supposed to have read for today. It was an essay that's called "That's What I Said But Not What I Meant." Now I wrote it for this journal. It was called Leaders in Communication, and they wanted to put that fancy title on it. I said, sure, go ahead, because it was kind of cute. It focused on these things. Now we won't spend so long on some of these, we'll spend more on others. Listening effectively, which you know we think listening is important. When you look at studies that were done and questions are asked of people that lead organizations, what they think, listening is usually one of those things that comes out near the very top. I just read a study recently that said listening is one of the premium things. I read another study, I happened to read about this in the Sunday paper. Yeah, I read the old paper. I also get it on my phone, but I read the old paper. I like to do it. And it was telling about a study, and it asked people what is the number one thing that is critical if somebody wants to be a leader. 73% said communicate. No surprise to me, and the others ranked it very high. You must be able to communicate, so that's why we're talking about communication today. Listen effectively, engage in two-way feedback, think before you speak and act, be dual focused. We already talked about that, of course, the last time I was with you, and building community. Now, this is what you just read in that Listening Effectively book. Again, we went to that PDF, which I wrote clear back in 1995, but it was less expensive for you than my newer one, and it really said all that needed to be said in the 5 chapters. You talked about them in your classes, about the need for better listening, fallacies, the process, types of listening, and how to be a better listener. And I gave some different suggestions under 3 levels. Under know, feel, do, which sounds like the Troy motto, doesn't it? Educate the mind to think, the heart to feel, and the body to act. Now, nobody even remembered the Troy motto when I wrote that book, and I certainly didn't know it, even though that motto was written back in 1887. We kind of rediscovered it the last few years. But it was no real coincidence that we're hitting on the same notes here, because I'll tell you what, the 3 domains of learning, and those of you who are in the School of Education, College of Education, will eventually learn these. One is the psychomotor, what you do. One is the cognitive, what you think, and the other is the affective, what you feel. So that all learning takes place in one of those 3 areas. So anyway, so we talked about those. Now, we're going to do a little test here. And it's also already in your book. I've already numbered for you. I've already numbered, and I've already told you what the code is. U is usually true, O occasionally true, and S seldom true. So here we go. Just answer these best you can with U, O, or S. Number 1, I like to listen to people share things about themselves. Usually that's true. Occasionally, seldom. I don't want to hear people talk about themselves. Just answer best you can. There are no right or wrong answers. Secondly, when somebody explains something to me, I have trouble explaining it to others. U, O, or S. Just answer it quickly as you can. 3, I remember an individual's voice even when I've not heard it for a long time. Okay? Usually, occasionally, seldom. People don't like to share their ideas or things about themselves with me. Number 5, I don't particularly enjoy listening to inspirational, entertaining, or humorous speeches. 6, speakers' nonverbal behavior or voice affect my understanding of their message. 7, I can recognize how a speaker's information fits with what I already know. 8, I like to listen to music, audiobooks, news, or sports when I'm in an automobile. Me, I listen to Sirius radio. Probably not the kind of music you like. I like classic country or any kind of gospel. You know, that's me. So that's just what I like to listen to. You've got your own, that's okay. Number 9, I often question and ponder a speaker's ideas. Let's think about it. And 10, I don't question what experts have to say. I mean, they're experts, okay? So, what do you do with those? Here you go. For these, for 1, 3, 7, 8, and 9, if you gave it a U, that question gets a 3. If you gave an O, it gets a 2. If you gave an S, you grade that question a 1. By the way, here's what you do with the other ones. I know these big numbers are challenging. Now what you do when you get them done is, questions 1 and 4, add those together so you can get as many as 6 points or as few as 2 points. And the same with 2 and 7, 5 and 8, 3 and 6, and 9 and 10. You're going to come up with 5 scores. Again, this is not a valid measure, but there's a longer test that this is part of. It's a pretty valid measure of what kind of listening seems to fit you the best. But I'm taking time on this for a reason. So, how many of was relationship one of your top ones? How about informational, appreciative, discriminative, critical? Got some of each. Bottom line is really this: you must work at all 5 types. You can't just be overweighted on one. I mean, yes, you want relationship listening. Oh man, that's important. But you got to listen for information. Yes, that's important. How about listening for yeah, I think it's good to have. You want to appreciate some stuff you listen to. How about when it comes to discriminate? Yes, you have to discriminate sometimes. Yes, you have to listen critically sometimes, because just because somebody says something, you have to wait. Does this really? Wait a minute. I don't want to jump on this too soon. Let me think critically about it. You have to. Hey, when you're buying something, you have to listen critically, or you'll spend your money foolishly. And we all have done that sometimes. So what I'm saying is, bottom line, work to be a better type of listener in all 5 types of listening. And it takes a lifetime, and I've been going at it for 79 years, and I'm not the listener I should be. And my wife used to say, John, why don't you read one of your own books? I said, yes, ma'am, when I hadn't listened as well as I should. So the point is this: work on your listening. Now, engaging in two-way feedback. I said some things in the article, but I want to say a few more things here. We focus primarily on giving and receiving, and I'll touch on this here, but let me approach it a little different way. You have to, if you're the leader, welcome feedback. In other words, saying, hey, give me some feedback on this, guys. And sometimes when you are getting feedback, you ask people on one-on-one, well, tell me how do you think that went today? Leaders must solicit feedback. It's very important, but you can't get defensive. Years ago, I had a lieutenant colonel that worked for me, and he was kind of my assistant that would kind of handle everything. And so he was working for me, and he would sometimes say, Dr. Kline, I need to talk with you a little bit, sir. And I said, yeah, come on in, Dan. He said, can I shut the door? I said, sure, shut the door. He sat down, he said, now, sir, this may be out of line, and you may want to fire me for this, but I got to tell you something. On that meeting you had a little earlier today, you might want to revisit that decision you made because of this, this, and this. But sir, he said, I just felt I needed to tell you. And I said, well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate it. Now, can I confess, sometimes when he went out the door, I pouted a little bit to myself. I guess none of you would ever do that, okay? But I want to tell you, I appreciated that guy. And I never, in fact, usually at night, I'd send him an email. Thanks, Dan, I'm still thinking about it. Or thanks, Dan, you've made me rethink this. Or thanks, Dan, I appreciate that, but I'm going to go ahead with what I said. And the next day I'd say, Dan, keep it up. That's the last guy in the world I wanted to fire. You know why? He was smart enough to come in and shut the door and tell me what he thought. And it helped me a lot. So, you have to not get defensive. And you got to use that feedback to help you grow. You're going to want to grow all through your life. Don't stop wanting to grow. Keep learning. And the more feedback you get and opinion from other people, the better you can grow. But you got to give the feedback tactfully. See, Dan gave the feedback tactfully. If I'm coming up to somebody and I want to give them some kind of feedback, and I say, now look, you did a good job in this. You got a lot of ability. Let me tell you some stuff you can do better, okay? He'll probably say, yes, sir. And so I'll show this and I'll say, now, if you do it this way next time, I think it's going to go better. Got it? You can do it, man. I'm with you. Okay, what'd I do? I was positive, wasn't I? I encouraged him, but I told him I wasn't holding back. I want him to do a better job. Okay, this is like a coach. You guys that are in athletics or have been in athletics, your coach isn't going to tell you always what you want to hear, but he's going to tell you what you need to hear. But I'm just saying, if you can give it tactfully, so care about the person. We'll say something else about that, about caring a little bit later. Feedback has to be ongoing. I can't say, okay, I haven't any feedback now for a couple of months, let's have some feedback. No, welcome it. I've got students that just come into my office and talk to me and tell me stuff. I think anybody that teaches for me knows I'll take feedback. I want it. Don't wait till the end of the semester. Don't wait till the end of the month. Tell me when it means something. But you as a leader have to establish the feedback mechanism that goes on. And if you welcome feedback, and if you use feedback, and if you thank people for feedback, you will benefit. Feedback keeps the communication channels open. Feedback keeps the communication channels open. And aren't we talking about communication? And if you can't communicate, don't try to lead. Think before you speak and act. How many have said something in the last few days and wish you hadn't said it? Yeah, me too. I've also, in my life, I've sent emails I wish I hadn't. You know what I've discovered now? Write the email, even when you're stirred up. Don't put an address on it, or else put your own and just send it back to yourself. And let it sit there for a few hours or a day. I've had a lot of emails I wrote at night that I didn't send the next day. When I looked at them again, I thought, oh man, I'm glad I didn't send that. I trash it. Junk it. Well, so I think I told you, those that went through Impact know about this watch chain. Belonged to my grandfather. Of course, now it's got my keys on it. I've got Grandpa's watch and the locket with Grandma's picture. That's at home. But I learned a lot of stuff from my grandpa. One of the things, he was funny, all the stuff that he told me. One of the things he said to me was, son, use that knot between your ears for something more than a hat rack, okay? He was saying, use your brain. So when he says that, I still remember that. I still remember that. Use your brain. And sometimes we don't use it, we don't think. We don't think things through. So it's important to think before you speak or act. You have to sharpen your communication skills. Now these are the basic communication skills. And certainly we've already talked about listening, but listening, reading, writing, speaking, and nonverbal communication. We've talked about some of those already today, but let me say something. We won't talk about that because we just talked about it. Becoming a better reader, I want to say something about this. Not that I can teach you how now, but I can maybe motivate you to become a better reader. Quite frankly, students now across the board are not as good as readers were when your parents went to college. I'm sorry. You don't have to be that way. Some things you can do, just some things you can do to be a better reader. One of them is simply to read different kinds of materials. Read books that kind of stretch you different ways. I know in my own development, when I got to college and once I got things straightened around a little bit, when I started reading different kinds of things, and it helped me expand. So don't read just about your interest, read about some other things. Somebody gives you a good book yeah, I'll take a look at that. And I know it's okay to read them if you want to read them on your Kindle or your computer. I'm still the old-fashioned, I like a book in my hand kind of guy, but that's just me. Build your vocabulary. One of the big things, the more words you can learn. And I'm telling you, you can learn them more at your age now. You still can when you're in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s slows down and 60s slows down and I'm telling you, you can't learn new stuff as easy as much. So but the stuff you learn when you're young will stick with you. I mean, my wife is an example of that. 15 years into Alzheimer's, she still remembers stuff that happened 50 years ago. She still can remember the words of songs better than I can. It's amazing. Stuff will stick with you. And even as you get older and have a normal aging mind, stuff you learn will stick with you and help you. Sometimes you learn words by you see them used in the context. You say, oh, and you see it used 2 or 3 times in context, you begin to know what the meaning of the word is. Now here's something. Learn the affixes, that is the prefixes, the things before words, and the suffixes after. So if you get this prefix, anytime you see A-N-T-E, what does that mean? Before. Yeah. There's a word antebellum, which means before what? Before the Civil War. Yeah, antebellum. That's just what it means. Now, poly. What's poly mean? Many, yeah. That's why a polygram has a lot of sides. That's why somebody that's in polygamy has more than one spouse. Poly means many. So by knowing what those mean, you can attach it, you get the meaning of the word. Now on the other hand, the things at the end. If something's less, if something is useless, it's probably what? Not very useful, is it, huh? When you see less at the end, it usually is a trigger for what might be going on. How about ology? We have psychology, biology, sociology. What is it? Study of. So anytime you see ology, you got to look and see what it's a study of. You got a word right there. I'm just telling you, you can learn a lot that way. I read a book in the 60s that had come out, I think, in the 50s. It is still available. It was called It Pays to Increase Your Word Power. I'd sit down, spend 10 or 15 minutes a day with it. It got to be kind of fun. And it'd take you through things like different suffixes and prefixes and different kinds of things. I increased my word power greatly with just that book. I wish I'd have done more of that kind of stuff. But then there was a test to see, wow, would I increase my word power? What I'm saying is, it's a pretty good use of time. You can entertain yourself. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff just out there online you can do the same thing with. Think about it, because the more words you use and the better your vocabulary, the better will be your leadership skills. Even words like love. When you see the word love, loveless, lovely, lovable. I mean, you take the word love, you know what love means, so you can get a whole lot of... Some of these words have so many different... They're the stems of so many different words. So learning the stems, bingo, and learning the suffixes and prefixes, bingo. You'll learn a lot of stuff. Then look up words you don't know sometimes. So easy now. We used to have to take out the dictionary and do it, and now you can do it in a hurry. I'm reading, I pull out my phone, put it on, there it is. Also tells me how to pronounce it, just like that. But I'm just saying, make it your point to learn a couple, 3 new words every day. It's not a bad use of time. So become a better reader. Now, a better writer. Now, some of you say, I can never be a good writer. I'm no good in English. Let me ask you something. Let me tell you about a story. This was a kid that got a 16 ACT in English. Probably most of you did better than that. Well, this kid in his first English, he managed to get a C in college. But his next one, the teacher helped him. He got A's after that. And yes, John Kline went on and majored in English. I had a 16 ACT in English. What I'm saying is, if it's just because you can't write good, use poor grammar, punctuation, spelling, you can learn that. Now, I'm not sure you can enhance your math score that much, but you can enhance your English score. I know you can. I just know you can. So, 3 things very quickly. And by the way, I've gone out and taught corporations. They've hired me to come teach their executives how to write more effectively. This is the kid that got 16 in ACT. Okay. I'm not bragging, I'm just using it as an example, kind of a humble example. I was not very good in English. Oh, by the way, when you read your 30 shoulds of leadership in here, read the 30th one. You'll read out something more about it and about the teacher that helped me. I'll bet you'll read that. Some of you won't wait till it's assigned now. Okay, you don't need to take any notes on this, but accuracy, brevity, and clarity. And accuracy is the structure. And by the way, listener-centered. Today as I'm talking to you, I'm not saying my objective is to teach you the importance of leadership and communication. My objective is for each of my listeners to understand the importance of communication to leadership. My objective is what I want from you, not what I want to do. Every time you speak or write, think about the audience. That's what it's all about. Obviously, you aren't very accurate if you don't know your stuff. If I'm talking about communication or leadership, I'm pretty good at it. Don't have me talk about accounting. I can't talk about accounting. Presentation. Okay, spelling is important. You can learn to spell better. Oh, I found a second misspelled word in my book, by the way. Me bad. Also found 3 comma problems. I wish I'd have done them differently, but okay. Now you can check and see if you can find them in there. Okay, grammar. You can learn grammar. I did. Punctuation, you can learn it. Now, let's talk about brevity and clarity. You aren't having to write this down. I'm just showing you. Just read this quickly. Don't try to write it down. Requires getting rid of unneeded words. Requires good structure and expression. Requires us to edit what we... Wait, what did I just say? Wait a minute. Maybe this is better. Oh, this is clearer and briefer, isn't it? Oh, I'm having fun. Look at this. Okay, get it? Okay, maybe I went too far. Maybe this is better. Okay, all that to say, you know what we do? We use too many words. You know why we do? A teacher says, write me a 1,000-word paper. If you don't know 1,000. You know what I tell my students in 4,400? They have a 2,000-word paper. I said, write 3,000, then edit it back to 2,000. You'll have a good paper. It works better. Write more than you need and then cut it down. It's briefer. It's clearer. It's more to the point. It works. It works. Don't write these down. Just read them. Oh, good. I saw a smile on that one. How about this one? Yes, I wrote P-O-R-E because that is the way you spell poor. Okay, look at that. Come on, wait. I just created that slide to be funny, kind of, but to also show sometimes we use active voice, not passive. I was using passive right there. Every one of them profanes the whole idea of it. Okay. Bottom line, work at becoming a better writer. If you're a better reader and a better writer, it will help you be a better leader. It really will. Now, a positive correlation between speaking effectively and leading effectively. I've taught a lot of speech courses. You know, it's really pretty simple. You start from general, an idea, and get specific. This is all there is to effective speaking. Now, I'm sure the people that teach speech around here would argue with me. And yes, it does take some explanation. Start with an objective that is listener-centered. Or if you're writing, one that is reader-centered. Next, decide what your main points are that support that. Then, choose your supporting material with the audience in mind. That's why I would use different supporting material with you than I would with people that are 70 years older than you. And then deliver it. Communicate the best you can. Well, that's all I'm going to say about it, really. Speaking for the listener, not for you. We talked about that last time I was with you. What's the most important, mission or people? Mission first, but people always? Yes, they're both important. Be dual focused. Building community, I want to say something about it. It's all about building a team. When we talk about community, it suggests it's a team trying to pull together. So some things to think about building community is you've got to energize people. You can't lead if you can't energize. Secondly, you can't lead if you don't encourage. Those of you that went through Impact this summer know that I talked about the importance of encouragement. I said you can put courage into people, you can be an encourager, or you can take courage out and be a discourager. Then I used that poem. I saw them tearing a building down. I guess I could say it again. I saw them tearing a building down, a gang of men in a dusty town with a yo-heave-ho and a hearty yell. They swung a beam and the sidewall fell. And I asked the foreman if these men were as skilled as the men he'd hire if he were to build, and he laughed and said, "Oh no, indeed, common labor is all I need, for these men can reckon a day or two what builders had taken years to do." And I asked myself as I went my way, what kind of a role am I to play? Am I the builder who builds with care, measuring life by the rule and square, or am I the wrecker who walks the town, content with the role of tearing down? And a good thing to remember, and a better thing to do, is to work with the construction gang and not the wrecking crew. You've got to encourage. But so important, you have to empathize. You have to have compassion. I read a book some years ago by a guy named Kent Crockett. It was a funny book. It was a funny title. It was called "Once I Was Blind, But Now I Squint." A takeoff on "Once I Was Blind, But Now I See." But he told a story in there. By the way, I found out that Kent Crockett now lives in Prattville, Alabama. So anyway, he told a story about his daughter Hannah. And Hannah, when she was in high school, was a junior varsity cheerleader, and she wanted to be a varsity cheerleader. And she went and told her parents she was going to try out for varsity cheerleader, and they said, "Honey, that's fine, but if you don't make it, don't worry about it. God got other plans for you. Don't you worry." Well, she had a friend named Melissa who was already a cheerleader in varsity, and so Melissa came and helped her. There were 2 slots available. And she came and helped her every day for several weeks. Now it came time for the trials and the tryouts. Parents weren't allowed. It was just the kids. It didn't last. It didn't end until late in the evening. Finally, about 9:30, they announced who the winners were. Hannah came home. She was crying. They said, "Hannah, it's okay you didn't make it. There's other things." "No, I made it. They gave me Melissa's slot. I got to go see Melissa." Hannah went over and stayed with Melissa that night. Hannah met with Melissa every day and encouraged her. Melissa got through it, although she felt pretty bad. Kent said every time Hannah went out to cheer, we were so proud of her, not because she was cheering, but because she had the empathy and the compassion and the care. Now let me tell you what. You've heard them say they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Let me tell you, leaders must have compassion and care and empathy for others. It is so important. It is missing in so many leaders. It all comes down to communication.